Next, Muyu. As the shout from the loudspeaker rang out, the originally noisy venue instantly fell silent. Hundreds of gazes converged upon a single person. The people around him involuntarily dispersed, clearing a spacious path. "Thanks, thanks." Muyu muttered his thanks while passing through the crowd. In any other setting, this scene would surely make someone think they were welcoming some big shot. But this was at school, not to mention Muyu was still wearing his school uniform. Yet, facing this unusual scene, the teacher waiting in front and the school security maintaining order watched with calm expressions, seemingly accustomed to it. In fact, Muyu really did count as a big shot at this school. The kind everyone knew, the kind everyone had heard of. Perhaps some students didn't know who the principal was, but no one wouldn't know Muyu. A beast who was rarely at school but always ranked first in the year. But that wasn't the main reason Muyu was famous. The real reason he was famous was that he was very useful. Homework too hard? Find Muyu. Being picked on? Find Muyu. Lost something? Find Muyu. Destroy evidence? Find Muyu. Want a child? Find, oh, you can't find him for that. In short, except for giving birth, no matter what it was, you could find Muyu to help settle it. As long as the money was right, there was nothing he couldn't accomplish. In the eyes of his classmates, this guy was just as magical as that blue fat cat who could pull anything out of its pocket. However, the difference between him and that friendly mechanical cat was like heaven and earth. When you asked Muyu to do something, once the job was done, your wallet would basically be empty too. Because every time you asked him to do something, once an unexpected change occurred, the employer would immediately receive a call, "The situation has changed. You need to pay more." This kind of cost that exceeded the budget naturally made people feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts, but you couldn't not pay the extra money. Over time, everyone got used to it and even crowned him with the title of Profiteer. "You know how to use the awakening stone, right?" The speaker was a tall and thin male teacher. Muyu nodded, subconsciously glancing at the hat that tightly wrapped the man's head, and then at the scorching sun hanging in the sky. If he remembered correctly, it should be 31 degrees today. "I heard Oldley was constantly getting stronger, looks like it's true," Muyu thought to himself. On such a hot day, a guy who never wore a hat suddenly wore one, and wrapped it so tightly, most likely, he had some unspeakable hidden trouble. Either he didn't wash his hair, or... "What are you staring at? Hurry up!" Oldley seemed to guess what Muyu was thinking, and his face darkened. All right. Muyu didn't dawdle anymore, placed his hand on the awakening stone used to connect to the dream realm, and began to meditate. About 20 years ago, on a certain day, an app called Dream Realm suddenly appeared out of thin air on everyone's mobile phones in this world. No one knew how it appeared, and when people clicked on this app, there was no reaction. Until later, the appearance of the awakening stone. At first, people didn't know what this fist-sized, colorful stone that came with its own breathing light was for. But as countries conducted various experiments on it, they finally figured out its correct usage. It turned out that this strange stone was the key to starting the dream realm. After contacting the awakening stone through meditation, one could awaken their own exclusive profession. Only those who possessed a profession could start the Dream Realm app. This gateway to other worlds. At first, the technique of meditation was only mastered by a small number of people. It only began to spread with subsequent continuous exploration. However, besides special practitioners, only high school seniors could learn this technique. The awakening stone was also strictly controlled. So, if you wanted to successfully obtain a profession, you had to get into high school and pass the annual academic assessments and exams to learn meditation and awaken in your senior year. After learning meditation, every student had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to ensure it would never be leaked. These non-disclosure agreements were created by lawyers. If violated, not only would it be detected immediately, but one would also suffer a mental blow. Although it wasn't fatal, it would cause one to faint on the spot immediately. By the time they woke up, they would probably be squatting behind iron bars. By the way, getting into high school in this world wasn't an easy thing. The admission rate was less than 30%. Awakening complete. Awakened, Mu Yu. Rank, Level 1. Attributes: Strength, 9, Agility, 9, Physique, 9, Intelligence, 9, Luck, 3. Profession, Player. Don? Ha? Oh yes. Mu Yu regained his senses and nodded. During the awakening process, the awakening stone's breathing light would stop, and when it finished, it would start flashing again. Old Li glanced at him without saying much. Next, Zhang Wei. According to regulations, after awakening, teachers were not allowed to ask students about their profession unless the person voluntarily disclosed it. Violators would be removed from their posts and sentenced depending on the circumstances. The main purpose of this regulation was to protect the privacy of every awakened. Of course, it was also to protect the teachers themselves. Because there was always a small group of people who would awaken some rather shady professions. If someone found out, the profession holder might even develop the thought of silencing them. Just like Mu Yu at this very moment. His expression was very complicated, mixed with surprise and confusion, and even carried a hint of shock. This mood was probably like a candidate who could usually only barely meet the undergraduate cutoff line, suddenly receiving an admission letter from a top university. It was truly a bit dreamlike. Profession, Player. Grade, Iridescent. Brief description: no matter which world it is, for you, it might just be a game, and for the world, you are a player. Skill: Personality conversion, based on Mu Yu's traits, converts multiple personalities into professions. When activated, the current profession can be replaced. Cooldown, 1 hour. Other skills will be unlocked after reaching rank 50/70. Existing personalities: cautious, optimistic, fearless, sinister, greedy, insane. Converted: assassin, lucky one, knight, conspirator, profiteer, jester. How should he put it? The brief description of this profession was very special, because Mu Yu was not originally from this world. That's right, he was a transmigration. One day, he woke up and found that he had come to this world. So if one insisted on saying that this world was a game to him, in essence, there was no problem, because he really had no sense of belonging to this world. Of course, Mu Yu would still take his life seriously and wouldn't really treat it as a game. After all, if he failed, there was a high probability there would be no chance to start over. But what Mu Yu cared about more was the player's skill. Converting multiple personalities into professions. Mu Yu had multiple personalities. It was an illness he had in his original world, and it still existed even after coming to this world. He didn't have multiple personality disorder in the true sense. All of Mu Yu's personalities held the same memories, there were no gaps, and there was no conflict between the personalities. At first, Mu Yu didn't realize this was a change in personality, thinking it was just his temper being a bit weird. Until later, he began to realize that every once in a while, his physical habits, personality traits, way of speaking, and even behavioral style would undergo a subversive change. This change had no warning and would be completed in an instant. At first, Mu Yu could only passively switch, but later he began to try to control this change. The result, naturally, was success. Since then, Mu Yu could switch to different personalities to handle things according to different occasions. So compared to personality, the word mode might be more appropriate. It was just that Mu Yu didn't expect that after coming to this world, all these personalities of his would actually be converted into professions. Iridescent grade. I remember I didn't seem to have saved the world in my previous life, right? Or did I really do it, and the memory was deleted? Mu Yu fell into deep thought. Profession grades, according to rarity, from low to high, can be divided into light gray, silver white, gloomy green, azure, splendid purple, deep red, obsidian black, and iridescent. Besides professions, the items in the Dream Realm dungeons were also rated according to this standard, among which iridescent was the highest level. But unlike items, the rarity of a profession also represented the strength of this profession, which was the rank limit. The iridescent level was already the ceiling among professions. Although the player profession only had one skill, it had infinite possibilities, which also meant that Muyu was a multi-profession awakened. And, personalities, the number wasn't fixed. Muyu originally only had 3 personalities: optimistic, cautious, and insane. Subsequent other personalities only slowly appeared, among which greedy was only born after coming to this world. After the awakening ceremony ended, Muyu went straight home. He was preparing to enter his first dungeon. Awakened detected dungeon is loading. Current instance, City of Blood and Sin. Instance difficulty, simple. Current number of awakened, 5. This instance has a roleplay trait. Please ensure your actions align with your identity. Based on the simple difficulty, you have received a hint: City of Sin, good is hard to tolerate. Instance completion reward. Awaken rank +1, Dream Coin +10, random silver white grade item related to your class X1. Instance loading complete. A foul stench, mixed with blood and rot, assaulted his nose. The walls on both sides were covered in chaotic bloodstains. Muyu was currently in an alleyway. City of Sin, good is hard to tolerate. Does that mean I cannot do good deeds? Muyu looked at the hint on his data panel, lost in thought. According to the textbooks provided by the school, instance types can be divided into 4 categories: survival, puzzle, confrontation, and roleplay. Among them, roleplay requires the awakened not to perform actions that do not fit their identity within the instance, which would lead to their identity being exposed as abnormal by the NPCs in the instance. And simple difficulty instances will provide the awakened with hints that are helpful for exploring the instance. This benefit will no longer exist in higher difficulty instances. City of Blood and Sin, it doesn't sound like a good place. And looking at this posture, fighting and brawling will probably be looked down upon. At the very least, it should be murder and arson, right? Looking at the bloodstained walls, Muyu couldn't help but complain. He couldn't help but think of a certain place with simple folk customs. A lawless land of chaos and disorder like this really makes one feel excited. Let's see what the instance tasks are first. Main Task 1, survive in the City of Blood and Sin for 3 days. Main Task 2, participate in killing 3 or more gang cadres or 1 gang leader. Main Task 3, participate in killing 3 or more patrol officers. Completion condition, complete 2 main tasks. Failure penalty, unable to receive rewards and lose all loot obtained in this instance. Major failure penalty, unable to enter the same instance again, unable to use any items produced by the same instance, unable to learn any class paths produced by the same instance. As expected of such a hellish task, but that's fine, extermination tasks are still better than puzzles. Muyu sighed. When entering the instance, he had already sensed something was wrong. This instance was not just a simple roleplay instance, it seemed to also hide a survival trait. Being the same simple level, the City of Blood and Sin was likely much more difficult than other instances of the same level, perhaps even the highest difficulty within simple. Since surviving for 3 days could be one of the main tasks, it was clear that surviving in this city was not an easy matter. You might kick the bucket at any moment. For example, right now. For sturdy shadows appeared at the alley entrance without warning. Ah, this, cornered at the start? That's not very appropriate, is it? Muyu also noticed the figures constantly closing in on him. However, he wasn't very panicked. It was just robbery, right? He didn't have a single cent on him. Of course, even if he had money, he wouldn't give it to them. Muyu, who wouldn't even get angry if beaten up a few times, would consider it a death feud if they robbed him of his wealth. As the 4 approached, Muyu could finally gradually hear their conversation. Boss, how much do you think this kid can sell for? TSK, with such delicate skin, he should be worth at least 400 gold. No. As far as I know, that person in the South District seems to like this type. If we sell him to him, the price could at least triple. It's been a long time since I've seen such high-quality goods. Boss, before we sell him, can you let me? 4th, get lost. This is goods prepared for that person. Is it your turn? At the very least, you have to let me go first. Wait. What is this situation? Damn. These people aren't robbing for money, but for that? Muyu suddenly felt a chill and absurdity. He, a dignified awakened with a fantasy-grade class, had his first encounter in his first instance be an attempted sexual assault? If it were an old lady, it might be fine, but these four sweaty men. You have successfully disgusted me. The last time I felt disgusted was when some guy named Zhangwei skipped out on the bill. Muyu exhaled, calming his mood slightly. The four big men approaching him wore ferocious smiles. They seemed to have already agreed on the order. Muyu's hands slowly dropped, as if he had given up resistance. What the opponents didn't notice was the mockery at the corner of his mouth, and the dagger that was gradually taking shape in his hand. Muyu counted the banknotes in his hand. Although he had never seen them and didn't recognize the local currency. But that didn't stop him from loving money. 4 people for 30 gold, they are really poor. I hope it's enough for me to get through tonight. After saying this, Muyu habitually pushed up his glasses. Unlike when he first entered the instance, Muyu now not only had a pair of black-rimmed glasses, but his hair had grown quite a bit and was even tied up with a hair tie. Although he was still wearing the same clothes, his walking posture and the aura he exuded were completely different from before. This was Muyu after switching personalities. Class, Assassin. Grade, Silver-White. Description, a common class transformed based on a cautious personality. As an assassin, being cautious is reasonable, right? Base attribute bonus, strength +1, physique +1, agility +3. Skills, backstab, silent step, dagger mastery. Backstab, active after lock-on to a target, attack damage initiated from behind the target increases by 20%, cooldown time, none. Silent step, passive when in walking or crouching/crawling state, footsteps are reduced by 50%. Dagger mastery, passive. Proficiently mastered techniques for using various daggers, including but not limited to attacking, throwing, etc. Considering that the instance environment was very dangerous and chaotic, and the completion conditions were extermination-type tasks. The assassin class, transformed based on a cautious personality, was very suitable for this instance. Interestingly, after switching classes, it seemed to bring some substantial changes to Muyu. For example, the dagger that suddenly appeared in his hand, as well as his longer hair and black-rimmed glasses. Relying on dagger mastery and Muyu's high base attributes, he easily took care of those 4 small fries. By the way, for a healthy ordinary adult, apart from luck which varies from 1 to 9, base attributes are usually between 4 and 6. 9 is already the attribute limit for ordinary humans. Even if forced to break through to 10, it cannot be maintained for a long time. Instead, it will cause continuous damage to the body and may even lead to a drop in attributes. After activating the assassin class, Muyu's strength, physique, and agility had all broken through to double digits, exceeding the limit level of humans. However, this did not mean he could do whatever he wanted. After all, the times are different now. My lord, the times have changed. Next, I still need to collect intelligence first, figure out the gang distribution in this city, and what the patrol officer, a profession that sounds like the police, is all about. It would be best to find the other few awakened. This instance has a lot of room for cooperation. If we coordinate and divide the work well, we will definitely be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. After all, the task requirement is participate in killing rather than killing, which means that getting an assist can also complete the task. Of course, compared to meeting up with other awakened, collecting intelligence is more important. Muyu's ideal situation is that he can find a small gang leader, kill him, then find a place to lay low, spend 3 days safely, and directly complete the instance and leave. What? Exceed the task? Not necessary, just completing the instance is fine. If it were the Profiteer transformed from a greedy personality, perhaps they would pursue a perfect completion and exceed the task. But the assassin with the cautious trait is not willing to look for trouble, it's better to be steady. Damn! What on earth is going on with this city? A young man with a buzz cut, wearing a black cloak, was sprinting frantically through the streets and alleys. Following closely behind him was a large group of fierce-looking, burly men wielding machetes. No way! Is there no one in charge here? In broad daylight, brandishing knives to hack people in public, is there no justice? Is there no law? Jiang Wei was truly about to go insane. He had just entered the instance, and before he even had time to check the clearance objectives, he found himself surrounded by a group of ill-intentioned people who immediately demanded protection money. Are you kidding? Who does he, Jiang Wei, think he is? How could he possibly be intimidated by just a few words? Until the other party each pulled out a 1-meter-long machete. Big brothers, it's not that I don't want to pay, I really don't have any money. Jiang Wei conceded on the spot. If he could, he would have paid the protection money, but the problem was, he really didn't have any money. Jiang Wei, who thought the worst that would happen was a beating, was instantly shocked upon hearing their response. Ha! No money? If you don't have money, how dare you come to the territory of our Bloodhand gang? Are you here to pick a fight? Wait, no, aren't you the ones picking a fight with me? Jiang Wei's expression was completely bewildered. Is it actually illegal not to pay protection money these days? It was clearly these guys extorting him, so why, according to their logic, was he the one in the wrong? Before he could even organize his thoughts, the group of burly men raised their knives, ready to chop him up on the spot. They brandished their knives while cursing, "Bad luck, don't know where this idiot came from. If we chop this meat up to feed my dog, won't the dog become stupid?" A danger sign instantly appeared over Jiang Wei's head. He hurriedly cast a flash spell and bolted from the crowd. However, the other party didn't seem prepared to let him go so easily, stubbornly chasing him with knives for 6 blocks. During Jiang Wei's flight, he finally managed to run into other people. He thought they wouldn't be so arrogant, but to his surprise, "Hey! Hack him for me, this guy came to our territory without paying protection money." "What? Isn't that just coming here to pick a fight? I'll hack him." Just like that, the group chasing him gradually grew from a 6-person gang of thugs into a large force of 18 people. It was a direct enactment of "you think you can leave after offending the abbot"? What kind of hellish instance is this? Even the local customs in Gotham City aren't this wholesome. Jiang Wei was on the verge of a breakdown. If it weren't for the fact that he had specifically trained his endurance and enhanced his escape abilities because of a certain incident in the past, he would have been chopped into mincemeat long ago. But even so, his stamina was bottoming out. He had been chased for over 30 minutes, and the people chasing him had already swapped out twice. The difficulty rating for this instance must be wrong, right? You call this an easy instance? And isn't this a roleplay instance? I feel like it's harder to survive here than in a survival instance. While running, Jiang Wei didn't forget to complain. While running earlier, he had managed to find time to check the clearance objectives. The words "survive for 3 days" in Main Quest 1 stabbed painfully at his nerves. 3 days? He hadn't even lasted 3 hours and he was about to kick the bucket. What to do, I'm going to die. Ha! Wait, holy crap, that is. Jiang Wei suddenly caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Although the person seemed a bit different from when he saw him not long ago, he was still able to recognize him at a glance. There's no mistake, it's him. A savior has arrived. After Muyu finished gathering intelligence, he set off for the nearest gang territory to conduct a field investigation and deploy an escape route for after he finished his business. What? You're asking how he gathered intelligence? Normally speaking, there are 2 low-threshold methods. One is to spend money to casually ask a passerby, "Anyway, it's just common knowledge, and as long as the money is right, everything is easy to discuss." Or go to places like bars and restaurants where all kinds of people mingle, sit quietly for an hour or 2, and prick up your ears to eavesdrop on others' conversations. This can also obtain some intelligence, though it might be useless. After all, it's obtained for free. However, Muyu didn't choose either of these methods. Or rather, he chose the first plan but used the second method. He randomly found a passerby and, relying on his superhuman physical fitness, dragged the person into a corner of an alley and held a dagger to the person's throat. Consequently, the other party confessed everything. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. The passerby was quite cooperative. Not only were their words and actions very calm, but they also took out protection money that seemed to have been prepared in advance and handed it to Muyu. It was so practiced that it was heartbreaking. When he finally left, Muyu not only had an extra 20 gold in his savings, but he also had a roasted meat roll in his hand. This seemed to be that passerby's dinner. Even though he was mentally prepared, Muyu was still slightly shocked by this baffling operation. Had the ideological awareness of the residents in this city really reached such a level? After entering the territory of the Bloodhand Gang, Muyu avoided the eyes of others as much as possible. Unlike the unmanaged public territories, areas already marked as gang territory cannot be entered at will. If discovered by gang members, one must pay protection money. And the time one can stay in this area is directly proportional to the amount of protection money paid. The more money you pay, the longer you can stay. If you are a big client, the gang responsible for managing this area will even assign a portion of their people to act as your temporary lackeys, escorting you and protecting you. However, because money is something that doesn't last long in this city, normal people wouldn't wander into territory occupied by gangs. Therefore, the first reaction of 9 out of 10 people you meet here is to come up and collect protection money. Originally, Muyu had completed a perfect infiltration, having avoided the vast majority of patrol routes, as well as the few routes and patrol personnel he couldn't avoid. Through his efforts, he also successfully managed not to expose himself. Until Profiteer you. Save me, save me, save me, save me, save me. Muyu was stunned. Only students from his school would call him by this nickname. That is to say, there was actually an awaken from their school in this instance? That really is a coincidence. Since it's a classmate from the same school, they must be very familiar with his style of doing things, and he would surely be able to earn a good, help them out. However, when Muyu looked toward the source of the sound, he saw a tearful face, ecstatic to the point of distortion, as well as the massive crowd behind the person. Muyu didn't even think about it, he turned around and retreated on the spot. It wasn't that he was scared by that group of people. Although they were all holding machetes, judging by their running speed and physical coordination, their stats were probably only around 5-6 points. As long as he took out the leaders in a short amount of time, the others, even with their numerical advantage, would be intimidated by Muyu's astonishing combat power. What actually made Muyu retreat was the young man with the buzz cut who was calling for help. Brother! No, Dad! Don't go, Dad! Help! I know I was in the wrong last time, but I already apologized to you, and even let you beat me up. When mentioning this, Zhang Wei's body trembled involuntarily. It was said to be a beating, but if Old Li hadn't stopped it back then, he would have almost died on the spot. That wasn't even the main point. The key was that when he went to get an injury checkup later, Zhang Wei couldn't find anything wrong, and the doctor even told him his body was perfectly healthy. Since then, Zhang Wei would feel intimidated whenever he saw Muyu, having to take a detour when walking, fearing that the other party might get angry again if they saw him one day. But in the current situation, he really had no choice. Compared to Muyu, the group of burly men behind him was more terrifying. Furthermore, if a novice instance failed, although one wouldn't actually die in reality, losing the experience and loot from the first instance would mean the gap between him and other awakened of the same batch would widen significantly. No, not only that, if he were to die in this situation, the system would definitely judge it as a major failure. Being unable to enter an instance of the same name meant that Zhang Wei would permanently lose an access channel to an easy-level instance, while also losing access to related items and career paths. Therefore, he absolutely could not die, no matter the cost. Dad! Dad, I'll pay double the price. Zhang Wei suddenly thought of something. Muyu remained unmoved. Triple. Muyu didn't turn back, but his pace slowed down slightly. 5 times. Dad! This child only has this much money, any more and I really don't have it. Zhang Wei shouted at the top of his lungs. Muyu stopped, turned around, and pushed up the frame of his glasses on the bridge of his nose. Sigh, there's really no helping you. Considering the money. Considering we are classmates, I'll help you out. As he spoke, a dagger fell into Muyu's hand. However, you know the rules. If you dare to skip the bill again. Muyu revealed a kind smile. Brother you, I hadn't even done anything since the start, and suddenly I was being extorted by this group. If it weren't for you, I would have been eliminated right at the start. Zhang Wei hesitated, wanting to say something, but in the end, he still voiced his question. What is going on with this instance? It was supposed to be a roleplay instance, but why does it feel like a survival instance to me? Tisk, didn't the instance name already tell you? City of Blood and Sin. If I chop you up, wouldn't there be both blood and sin? Muyu's tone was very perfunctory. He had just wiped out this group of thugs and was currently happily collecting his loot, commonly known as looting corpses. You have to say, the members of the Blood Hand Gang were much wealthier than the street thugs Muyu had encountered before. These 18 people had added another 2,000 gold to Muyu's little treasury. Sweet. It was just too sweet. Averaging over 100 gold per person, and these were just small fry, not even counting his officers. If he could take out 100 people, that would be 20,000 gold. According to the rules of the Dream Realm, although the currency in these instances could not be brought back to the real world, it could be automatically converted into the exclusive gold coins of the Dream Realm upon clearing the instance. The exchange rate for this instance was 1,000:1. However, considering that clearing the instance only rewarded 10 gold coins, this sum was actually not insignificant. A bold idea suddenly occurred to Muyu. If he were to wipe out the entire gang, wouldn't that be? Big brother, stop teasing me. This city is just too weird. It feels like everyone here is a villain. Zhang Wei's mournful voice interrupted Muyu's daydreaming. Muyu stripped off a slightly cleaner piece of clothing, wiped the blood off his hands, and tossed it aside. He stood up and stared down at the corpses on the ground. I'm not teasing you. This city is just like its name, filled with blood and sin. The entire city is divided and occupied by several gangs. Apart from the public territory meant to maintain the balance of power, the heads of each gang are like local emperors, controlling everything within their territory. You were unlucky, your spawn point landed right in the territory of the Blood Hand Gang nut. Zhang Wei's eyes widened, his expression one of utter despair. Doesn't that mean this is a lawless land? It's over, it's over. Muyu glanced at him and turned to walk back the way they came. The fight with those minions hadn't lasted long, but considering the commotion Zhang Wei had made, new pursuers might arrive soon. Actually, he wasn't afraid of pursuers, what he was more worried about was that they might bring tools, the kind of tools that could gun him down instantly. Although his attributes had already exceeded the limits of an ordinary human, his control over his body and his techniques hadn't been developed to the limit, so he had no way to ignore the threat posed by bullets for the time being. If it were a handgun with a slow rate of fire, with good luck, there might be a chance to dodge it, but if it were a submachine gun or a fully automatic rifle, then better to slip away first. It can't really be called a lawless land. The various gangs actually follow rules, provided you pay up. As long as the money is right, even if you piss on their leader's head, they'll only applaud and cheer for you. Zhang Wei was shocked by this, but on second thought, in a city where even failing to pay protection money was considered a wrong, the idea of a gang leader selling their dignity for money didn't seem like such an outrageous setting. Speaking of which, he happened to know someone who would sell even their dignity for money. Zhang Wei's gaze drifted involuntarily toward Muyu. Don't even think about it, you can't afford this service. Cough, cough, brother you, what are you talking about? And what the hell was you can't afford this service? So, if the money is right, can such things really be done? Alright, we've walked out of the Blood Hand Gang's territory. We're in a public area now, which is relatively safer. Well, only relatively. While saying this, Muyu thought of the four-person group that had tried to rob him at the start, and the passerby who was heartbreakingly skilled at handling being held hostage. Did a truly safe place even exist in this city? Then I'm relieved. Oh right, brother, about the fee for this time. Zhang Wei suddenly remembered something and asked hurriedly. As the payer, he looked even more anxious than Muyu, the recipient. Past experience had made him abnormally sensitive to such matters, and he had also realized one very important thing: never skip out on the bill. Charging you 1,000 gold to save your life isn't excessive, right? But considering you don't have any money in this instance, let's settle the bill with instance gold coins. Multiply it by 5, and according to the exchange rate, you just need to pay me 5 Dream Realm gold coins after the instance ends. Got it, got it. I guarantee I'll pay you the first thing after the instance ends. Zhang Wei let out a long sigh of relief. Although it hurt his wallet, compared to being kicked out of the instance right at the start, this cost was nothing. That said, as an awakened, how could you not even handle a group of ordinary people? Muyu asked with some curiosity. Zhang Wei had already explained the cause and effect to him on the road. Actually, if he had taken care of those 6 people at the very beginning, the group wouldn't have dragged on, eventually turning into a large force of over 20 people. Normally speaking, an awakened who had obtained a class could easily 1v6 against 6 small fry with attributes of only 5-6, at most sustaining minor injuries. There was no need to run away at all. Although Zhang Wei occasionally had short circuits, he wasn't completely brainless. Since he chose to run away from the start, that meant he might really not have had the ability to handle that situation. Zhang Wei looked embarrassed, lowered his head, and sighed, his eyes full of helplessness. I didn't want it to be like this either, but my luck was just too bad. Does it have to do with your class? Zhang Wei was silent for a moment, then shook his head. It doesn't really have anything to do with the class. I won't hide it, it's a common class anyway. My class is mage. Oh? It is indeed a common class, but a mage shouldn't be unable to take down 6 ordinary people, right? Muyu raised an eyebrow. The mage class appeared very frequently among the awakened. Almost 1 out of every 5 people would awaken as a mage. Mages did not have an advantage in close quarters combat during the novice stage because the base attributes added by this class were agility +2, intelligence +3, with no bonuses to strength or physique. But this did not mean that a mage's combat power was weak in the early stages. On the contrary, in the novice stage, mage was one of the most threatening classes. When everyone awakened their first class, they would randomly receive 3 skills that could be learned at the current level of that class. For a mage, as long as they randomly received an offensive spell like Fireball, Ice Bolt, or Electric Shock at the start, it would leave a squishy target at least half dead, if not killed outright. Oh, I get it. The skills you randomly received were the problem, right? Zhang Wei nodded, a bitter smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. The problem is huge. At the start, I randomly got Flash Spell, Mana Fountain, and Super Perception, and then I was assigned to this kind of instance. I really... the system of the Dream Realm really takes care of you. Muyu instantly understood why Zhang Wei ran whenever he saw people. There was no helping it, the 3 skills he had drawn were just too hellish. Flash Spell goes without saying. Its effect is roughly equivalent to a flashbang, although if the caster is skilled, they can control the light intensity, and in specific situations, it can also be used as a lighting spell. Mana Fountain is a passive skill that increases the rate of mana recovery, a god-tier skill for magic-type classes. The only problem is that among Zhang Wei's 3 starting skills, only Flash Spell is an active skill, and he can't even drain his mana. As for Super Perception, it has the ability to increase the perception attribute. It does not belong exclusively to magic-type classes but exists in the general domain, a passive skill that any class can learn. Actually, if taken individually, these 3 skills are quite good. It's just that when they are combined together, even a dog would shake its head at them. Brother, I can't survive in this instance on my own. Can I just tag along with you? Zhang Wei looked at Muyu pitifully. Ha? Tag along with me. It's not impossible, but that will cost extra. After some friendly negotiation, Zhang Wei spent another 5 dream coins to latch onto Muyu's leg. Although this meant Zhang Wei would have no gold coin rewards in this instance, it was still better than failing the mission. After all, even without gold coins, there were still other rewards. By the way, a friendly tip: it's best not to do good deeds in this city, especially don't help others for no reason. At the dining table, Muyu said this to Zhang Wei, who was gnawing on cornbread in the seat opposite him, while cutting his steak. He had spent 200 bills to rent this 3-bedroom apartment. Although the city of blood and sin was chaotic, it was not entirely without order. The major gangs all followed one rule: no committing crimes inside a residence. In other words, even if you offended a gang leader, as long as you saved up enough food and water and could endure a life without electricity or running water, you could stay holed up in the house without any danger to your life. However, this rule only applied to houses you bought or rented. If it were a hotel or a guest house, you wouldn't be able to obtain the safe house trait. That was why, even though he only needed to stay for 3 days, Muyu hadn't gone to a hotel, but instead paid a high price to rent a house. Even if he wasn't necessarily going to be sought out, he still chose to be cautious. After all, if you stayed in a hotel and really angered those gangs, as long as the hotel owner wasn't around, it wasn't impossible for them to just throw an RPG inside. Zhang Wei chewed on the bread in his mouth, drooling as he stared at the steak in front of Muyu. Only after swallowing his food did he ask, "Is it because of that hint, City of Sin, goodness is hard to tolerate?" "That's just a hint, not the reason. The order and rules of this city are far more distorted than those of our world, which is why we feel so out of place here. In the eyes of the people in this city, there is no concept of goodness. When you help others without asking for anything in return, it is assumed to be a form of solicitation. And when the other party accepts your help, it counts as a forced acceptance of your solicitation, and you will then be viewed as a collective, even if there are only 2 people. The concept of a gang is built upon the collective, you should understand now, right?" This was the inference Muyu had made based on the intelligence he had gathered and his own judgment. It wasn't that one couldn't do good deeds in the city of blood and sin, it was just that such behavior was extremely dangerous. Zhang Wei was stunned, his eyes widening. "Damn, there's actually this kind of setting? Wait, brother, then you just saved me, so what about you?" "Oh, that case doesn't count. I charged you money to save you, so it doesn't count as doing good deeds, it can only be considered a service." This intelligence also costs money. After the instance ends, just transfer me 200 renminbi. Zhang Wei was silent for a moment. This intelligence was indeed quite important, and the price of 200 renminbi wasn't unacceptable, just a little high. At the same time, this was also Muyu's method to avoid the good deeds mechanism, yet he still felt it was very strange. Why was he ripped off for another 200 bucks without even realizing it? Although he wasn't some wealthy young master, compared to his weekly allowance of 2,000 plus, these 200 bucks really didn't amount to much. But this feeling of forced buying and selling was so unpleasant. No, he had to make it clear to him, "Don't treat me like a sucker to be slaughtered." Zhang Wei decided he wanted to be tough for once. Ding! The sound of cutlery clashing instantly pulled Zhang Wei's consciousness back. He subconsciously stood up in a hurry. "Brother, 200 isn't enough, right? Should we add some more? Then, how about 300? Muyu, who had just finished eating and put down his cutlery, was stunned. He had asked the price tentatively, yet Zhang Wei had agreed without hesitation. Why would someone raise the price on themselves? Muyu scratched his head. "I'm going back to my room to rest, eat slowly." He didn't dwell on it too much, because there was still a lot of intelligence to organize, and he also had to customize an action plan. It was already dusk when they entered the instance, and now twilight had arrived. If he was efficient enough, he planned to finish the plan and go out for a trip during the night. A dark and windy night is the perfect time for. How could he not stir up some trouble? "All right, brother." Zhang Wei watched Muyu enter the room. "What's going on? What happened to being tough? Why did he lose another 100 bucks? He stared blankly ahead, continuing to gnaw on his bread with tears in his eyes. So spineless. Bloodhand Gang, Patrol Officer, Central Adjudication Hall. These three terms divided the white paper into three equal parts, and under each term, dense, messy information was written. This was Mu Yu's personal habit. When circumstances permitted, he liked to write down the information he had mastered on paper and then integrate it. This helped him think more quickly. The Bloodhand Gang was not a small gang, on the contrary, it was a behemoth. In the city of blood and sin, blood and crime were indeed everywhere, but establishing a gang was not such an easy matter. Especially a gang that had received public recognition. That's right, in this city, gangs could exist with public recognition and would have their own exclusive territories. As for those gangs that had not received public recognition, although they existed, they could not obtain their own territory, they could only fight for resources in public areas. In the city of blood and sin, there were only 8 gangs that had truly received public recognition, or perhaps 4. Because 5 of them had weaker forces and low public recognition, making them unable to compete with the other 3 more senior and powerful gangs, and they might even be annexed. Therefore, they chose to connect their respective territories and established a new organization, the 5 Great Allied Association. As for the other 3 gangs, they were the truly socially influential and powerful local snakes. The gangs and the mission requirements should be these ones recognized by the city's residents. It seems that Kid Zhang Wei is quite lucky, running into the mission target right at the start. Mu Yu was also a bit impressed by Zhang Wei. The 3 skills he had drawn were all quite good when taken individually, and the Bloodhand Gang was also the relatively weakest among all these gangs. Yet, he seemed to lack the ability to handle these lucky events. When a good thing happened at the wrong place and time, it could also turn into a bad thing. The main member structure of the Bloodhand Gang consisted of a leader known as Iron Bloodhand, plus 10 advanced cadres blood fighters, and an uncountable number of elementary cadres blood disciples who could become such as long as they contributed enough. Mu Yu deduced that these so-called cadres were likely gang members who had obtained a class, and already possessed extraordinary powers. Blood disciples likely corresponded to silver-white rank classes, blood fighters corresponded to deep green rank classes, and Iron Bloodhand was likely an azure rank intermediate class. Among them, the rank caps for deep green and azure rank classes were 30 and 50 respectively. With his current abilities, Mu Yu was not confident in confronting enemies of these 2 ranks. And the maximum rank cap for the silver-white rank blood disciples would only be 10. Their base attributes would not be much higher than Mu Yu's, and their skill sets were not necessarily better than his. It seems the target for main mission 2 can only be set on the blood disciples. The other 2 major gangs besides the Bloodhand Gang were stronger than the Bloodhand Gang, especially the number 1 ranked White Ghost Gang. It was said that all the gang leaders combined couldn't defeat their leader White Ghost. And consequently, the strength of the cadres under the White Ghost Gang was also far stronger than those of other gangs. If it weren't for the limited number of cadre positions within the White Ghost Gang, the excessively high threshold, the intense internal competition, and the relatively severe internal attrition, the city of blood and sin could probably be renamed the City of White Ghost. As for the 5 greats, although individual gangs were weaker, their combined strength was not weak, and they were also the organization that occupied the most territory. Their elementary cadres might indeed be weaker, but they had many people, which resulted in even the cadres basically traveling in groups. Traveling in groups here didn't mean leading a bunch of small fry, but rather multiple cadres forming a squad to patrol. After thinking it over, the Bloodhand Gang was still easier to bully. Besides, since he had already offended them, he might as well offend them thoroughly and not provoke other forces. Well, it's more satisfying to just keep shearing one sheep. Unlike Main Quest 2, the corresponding Main Quest 3 requires killing 3 patrol officers. In the City of Blood and Sin, patrol officers are somewhat like police, but unlike police, they do not manage crime, or rather, in this city, there is no concept of crime at all. They are only responsible for patrolling to see if any gangs have crossed the line or are attempting to occupy territory without public permission. Gangs that have not been publicly acknowledged are not allowed to own their own territory, but there are always some dim-witted people who try to challenge this bottom line. Besides this, another bottom line in the City of Blood and Sin is also managed by patrol officers: home invasion. At the same time, patrol officers are allowed to move freely in the territories of major gangs without having to pay protection fees. This is because to obtain the patrol officer profession, one needs to get approval from the Central Adjudication Hall, and the higher-ups of the Central Adjudication Hall are basically composed of the wealthy, elite professors, and high-level cadres of major gangs in this city. Therefore, the major gangs themselves are also supporters of the patrol officers. Nominally and from a starting point, patrol officers are law enforcement personnel who maintain the interests of the entire city. That said, there is a big problem here. Patrol officers only have the power to arrest, but not the power to judge. In other words, even if a patrol officer finds a sinner who has crossed the line, they can only try their best to capture them and then hand them over to the Central Adjudication Hall for trial. This not only increases the difficulty of the patrol officer's work, as capturing alive is much harder than killing on the spot, but it also gives criminals more room to maneuver. For example, bribing the counselors of the Central Adjudication Hall, or having accomplices break them out of prison during the transfer, these methods can all circumvent the final judgment. It is said that crossing the line will arouse public anger and is unforgivable, but how could a city that is already rotten to the core have any bottom line to speak of? As long as the act of bribery itself is not discovered, or if it is discovered but there is no evidence, everyone will turn a blind eye and pretend not to see it. Those who can sit in the positions of counselors in the Central Adjudication Hall are not good people themselves. Rather, only those who are wicked to the extreme can stand at the top of the food chain in this city full of blood and sin. They are either black-hearted merchants who are obsessed with money and accumulate wealth without any bottom line, or beast professors who suppress students and steal their results to reach high positions. As for the high-level gang cadres, it goes without saying. Counting on this group of people to make a fair judgment is like hoping those crappy developers can come up with a decent event plan. Looking at it from another angle, the patrol officers working under this group of people are mostly not good things either. It's not that there are no people in this city willing to stand up, but to become a patrol officer, one must first be recognized by the Central Adjudication Hall. Muyu does not think those people would specifically raise a group of dogs to bite themselves, even if there are a few outliers who truly want to maintain order and have their bodies in Chaoying but their hearts in Han. But they only have the power of arrest, not the power of judgment. To go deeper, the order they maintain is nothing more than a fence used by the wicked to herd sheep. The significance of the existence of patrol officers is nothing more than to deceive the residents. Look, our city actually still has order, everyone can just rest assured and live here. Disgusting. Perhaps patrol officer will be easier to deal with than blood disciple. If it is for the purpose of executing arrests, then the skill set of patrol officer is highly likely to be composed of control skills, and they probably won't install high damage skills. And in order to effectively control these sheepdogs used to patrol the sheepfold and ensure they do not lose control, the patrol officer profession is likely just a silver-white tier profession. A low-tier professional with only control, low output, and who wanders around, exposed on the street, is basically free experience in front of Muyu's assassin with its perfect skill set combination. However, considering that the movements of patrol officers are erratic, in other words, this monster does not have a fixed spawn point, Muyu still set Blood Disciple as the primary attack target. As for the patrol officer, he would farm them if he met them, and if not, there was nothing he could do, everything would follow fate. Finally, there is the power center that truly controls the city, the Central Adjudication Hall, which is the maintainer of order on the surface, but actually the hub of all the highest sins of this city. Compared to the information about gangs and patrol officers that is open to the public, the intelligence on the Central Adjudication Hall is locked down. Ordinary people only know that this organization is responsible for judging criminals and that the counselors inside are the highest power holders in this city. They know nothing else. Maintaining mystery in the unknown is also an effective means of maintaining rule. Obviously, these top-tier scum understand this principle very well. If Muyu hadn't caught a few gang members in the territory of the Blood Hand Gang earlier and gotten some information that ordinary people don't know, he would probably be completely clueless. In addition to those counselors, the Central Adjudication Hall has a subordinate agency, the Arbitration Bureau. There are two positions in the Bureau, arbitrators who are responsible for management, and hands of arbitration who are responsible for executing tasks. The two have a superior-subordinate relationship. It can be seen from the names that arbitrator should be the higher tier profession for hand of arbitration, with the two corresponding to the silver white and dark green tiers, respectively. The above intelligence is not open to ordinary people, but is only open to certain people, such as gang members, wealthy lackeys, and black-hearted teachers. If Muyu guessed correctly, the Arbitration Bureau should be an agency established to counter the patrol officers, and it is estimated that they will also be sent by the counselors to do some things they want to do but are not convenient to do openly. Other than that, Muyu could not find out any other intelligence about the Central Adjudication Hall, such as the headquarters of the Central Adjudication Hall, the members of the council, the location of the Arbitration Bureau, etc. These are not things that an ordinary gang member would know. At the very least, it would have to be low-level cadres, or even high-level cadres, who could grasp such intelligence. Central Adjudication Hall and Arbitration Bureau? They really know how to pick names, it's just a pity that none of the things they do are human. A mocking smile hung on the corner of Muyu's mouth. These were not all his speculations, but were based on facts. Those interrogated gang members would always have one or two who would accidentally mock and complain, and even couldn't help but give an example. By the time they realized they seemed to have said too much, it was already too late. They were not brainless, nor did they intend to leak information, but they cursed too frequently in their daily lives, leading to a habit. As long as the Central Adjudication Hall, the Arbitration Bureau, and the so-called patrol officers were mentioned, they couldn't help but curse a few times. Muyu picked up the paper filled with handwriting on the table, scanned it carefully, and then took a lighter out of his pocket. The ashes after burning drifted to the ground and dissipated in the air before even landing. The train of thought had been sorted out, and what needed to be remembered had been put into his brain. This piece of paper no longer had any meaning to exist. He looked out the window. The weather was very good, the moon was hanging high, and the moonlight shone into the room through the glass, only for some reason, this light was blood red. Muyu did not consider himself a good person, but such a city that looked like pus was truly an eyesore to him. How about, let's just cause a big scene? That must be very interesting. The inner voice sounded along with a wild laugh. Muyu pushed up his glasses. Don't be impatient. Wait until I finish the quest, then it will be your turn. Brother, is it really okay for us to just walk in like this? Zhang Wei looked around left and right, asking nervously. He and Muyu had already stepped into the territory of the Bloodhand gang. As a poor soul who had been chased through a dozen streets here, he still felt somewhat uneasy about this place, which was both strange and familiar. What are you panicking about? We're here to hack people, not to steal. There's nothing to be afraid of, Muyu pushed up his glasses and replied calmly. Take advantage of the fact that it's not yet dawn and move quickly. We might be able to complete main quest 2 tonight. It's exactly because of that attitude that I'm afraid. The corners of Zhang Wei's mouth twitched slightly. He understood the principle of a dark and windy night for murder, but since this was his first time doing such a thing, it was inevitable that he would feel nervous. Precisely because of this, the way he looked at Muyu became increasingly uncomfortable. No matter how he looked at it, the other party didn't seem like someone doing this for the first time, and he even seemed quite experienced. Zhang Wei couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. He really didn't know how he had survived when he first skipped out on the bill. The two didn't walk for long before they bumped head-on into a group of burly men. This was inevitable, as the route Muyu chose did not bypass the patrols. It wasn't that he was walking directly along the patrol route, but rather, he was being exceptionally arrogant. We've been discovered. Damn, why are there so many people? Weren't there only 5 or 6 in a group during the day? Why are there 10 at night? Zhang Wei subconsciously wanted to turn tail and run, but was grabbed by Muyu. Isn't that obvious? You caused such a big scene this afternoon, killing so many people from the Bloodhand gang. If they didn't increase security, I could only say that the officers of this gang have a real talent for being cops in Gotham City. So that's it. Wait. You were the one who killed those people this afternoon. But you are the source of all evil. If you hadn't failed to pay the protection fee and kept running around blindly, they wouldn't have met me. Regardless, I'm just getting paid to do a job. Big brother. If I didn't run, I would have died. Muyu spread his hands. Then that is your problem. A professional, being chased by 6 ordinary people. If it really doesn't work out, maybe you should go be a cop in Gotham City. I think you have a talent for that. Brother, if you want to call me a loser, you don't have to be so roundabout. During their conversation, the group of burly men had already walked up to them and formed an arc-shaped human wall, blocking the two of them tightly in a semi-enclosure. This was to prevent anyone from forcibly breaking into the gang's territory without paying the protection fee. What happened during the day had already spread throughout the entire Bloodhand gang, so now they would rather let people run away at the border than allow anyone to run around inside their territory. Hey, you two. Before the leading burly man could finish his sentence, Muyu had already taken out 20 10 yuan banknotes. 2 people, how long does 200 gold get us? Seeing the banknotes, the expressions of the burly men in front of Muyu softened quite a bit, and they also relaxed. Enough for you to stay here for 10 days. However, this fee does not include your rent. If you want to find a place to stay, you need to find it yourself. Among these gangs with independent territories, besides the 2 rules that one must pay the protection fee and that one will not be harassed by local gang members after paying, other regulations vary. For example, the protection fee of the Bloodhand gang does not include rent, and you need to find a house separately, whereas in the White Ghost gang, the protection fee includes this part, and gang members will lead you to choose a house. Of course, the protection fee of the White Ghost gang is naturally more expensive. The same price might get you 10 days in the Bloodhand gang, but in the White Ghost gang's territory, it might only get you 3 days. And the reason why people would take the initiative to pay high protection fees and step into the gang's territory, besides avoiding disaster, is more often to do business and make money. Every gang has its own unique products, and these products are not actively circulated outside by the gang, but are sold within their own territory. This not only attracts merchants or customers in urgent need of products to pay a large protection fee, but can also effectively control the circulation rate of these products in the market, control supply when in urgent need, and thereby raise prices to amass wealth. If the demand for these products is not high, it wouldn't cause much of an impact. But as it happens, the products held by these gangs are all very useful necessities, or rather, necessities in this city. The blood drop of the Bloodhand gang can quickly heal injuries and belongs to very precious medical drugs. The cyan iris of the Qinglang gang has the effect of improving temperament and curing eye diseases, equivalent to monthly disposable colored contacts that can effectively treat myopia. The white tobacco of the White Ghost gang is a type of herb. The smoke rising during its boiling process can effectively treat insomnia and resist anxiety and depression, though excessive use will lead to addiction. The above are all special products mastered by these gangs, and the vast majority of these products are consumables that need to be replenished. This is why these gangs are recognized, and even if they charge high protection fees, there are still people blindly drilling into their territory. There are other regulations. For instance, in the Bloodhand gang's territory, even if you pay, while gang members won't give you trouble, if other residents who have also paid come to harass or loot your property, the Bloodhand gang doesn't care about these things. However, the Qinglang gang, which ranks second among the 3 major gangs, completely prohibits such behavior. If you offend someone outside, the best way is to go to the Qinglang gang's territory. If you have enough money, you can stay inside and wear out your enemy. But as the saying goes, in this city, order is only customized for the majority of people. There are still some people who can ignore or even trample on order. The burly man took the banknotes from Muyu's hand and then took out a device that looked a bit like a little smart. I'll register your basic information first. As he spoke, the burly man picked up the device and aimed it at Muyu. With a click, a black and white photo popped out from the top of the device. Good heavens, is this thing actually a camera? It doesn't even have a lens. What is the principle behind this, hey? The photo popping out wasn't the end. The other party turned the little smart upside down and inserted the photo into a card slot. Alright, your appearance has been filed with us. I wish you a pleasant stay for the next 10 days. The burly man, completely different from his previous ferocious appearance, said very politely to Muyu. Wait, can this thing transmit photo data too? Why can something that looks so low-tech have such advanced functions? Muyu indicated that he didn't understand, but was greatly shocked. Subsequently, the burly man aimed at Zhang Wei, and with another click, after the photo popped out, just as the burly man was about to insert it into the card slot, a companion beside him suddenly said, "Wait, haven't we seen this guy somewhere before? Look familiar?" The burly man holding the photo examined it closely, frowning slightly. "Now that you mention it, it does look a bit familiar. Wait. Isn't this that bastard who snuck into our territory this afternoon, didn't pay protection money, and even killed dozens of our brothers? Oh no. We've been discovered. Hey. You guys." Before the burly man could finish his sentence, a blinding white light suddenly flared up. He let out a scream and instinctively raised his hands to shield himself from the dazzling glare. The light was fleeting, but their eyes couldn't recover immediately. Thump, thump, the sound of bodies hitting the ground followed one after another. In just 3 short seconds, the only people left standing were Muyu, who was toying with his dagger, and Zhang Wei, who couldn't bear to watch the scene. "Bro, I'm just saying, can we not make the scene so bloody every single time?" Zhang Wei had already realized something was wrong the moment that man said, "Have I seen you somewhere before?" So, before the opponent could react, he decisively cast Flash Spell to land some crowd control. Furthermore, under his control, the position and angle of the light source were extremely tricky. It blinded the 10 people opposite them while not affecting himself or Muyu. In reality, Zhang Wei was actually not weak. His ability to control and develop spells was top tier, which might be why he awakening into the mage class. It was just that the skills he randomly started with were adding too much difficulty to his game. Muyu casually grabbed a piece of clothing, wiped the blood off his dagger, and glanced at Zhang Wei. "How about you do it?" Never mind. You're the boss, do whatever you want. I'm just trash." Zhang Wei hurriedly shook his head, then seemed to remember something else. "By the way, what was that about them saying I killed dozens of their brothers? I remember that group this afternoon only had a dozen or so people." "You might have remembered it wrong. I recall them having over 20 people, which counts as dozens, right?" Muyu explained calmly, though there was a hint of pity in his eyes as he looked at Zhang Wei. The Bloodhand Gang probably attributed all the enemies he had killed while infiltrating that afternoon to Zhang Wei as well. If he remembered correctly, the total added up to about 30 or 40 people. It couldn't be helped. Although he was an assassin, his initial skills didn't include anything like stealth. A simple silent step wasn't enough for him to bypass all the guards. Plus, the Bloodhand Gang had a lot of manpower. Although this gang was the weakest of the 3 major gangs, they had the highest number of members. Especially those small fries who weren't even elementary cadres. They were a dime a dozen. To be able to advance all the way from the peripheral area to the central area while only taking out 30 or 40 guards along the way, Muyu had already done quite well. Anyway, as long as he wasn't discovered, it was a perfect stealth mission. And as long as Muyu killed everyone who discovered him, that was equivalent to not being discovered. Therefore, Muyu had actually performed a perfect stealth mission that afternoon. It was all Zhang Wei's fault that he was completely exposed. Since it was because of him that he was exposed, it was only natural that he should take the blame. Muyu nodded to himself. Really? Is that so?" Zhang Wei looked at Muyu, feeling that something about this didn't seem right. But he didn't dare to speak up, nor did he dare to ask. What could he do? If the boss said so, then it was so. Wait, if that's the case, doesn't that make me a wanted criminal here? Zhang Wei suddenly realized this serious problem. Since the photo information was circulating internally, he basically ran the risk of being recognized wherever he went. As for why that group just now didn't recognize him immediately, it was probably because the photo resolution wasn't high. The fact that this device, which didn't look very high-end, could take photos and transmit data over long distances had already shocked Zhang Wei and Muyu. If the photos it took were 1080p Blu-ray ultra-clear versions, then they would really have to think about whether their world's technology tree had been leveled incorrectly. To be precise, you are now a wanted criminal and an undocumented resident. We will be spending the next 3 days here. Damn it! Why didn't you tell me sooner? These words caused Zhang Wei's pupils to dilate in shock. Before coming, he hadn't even been told what they were doing. As a tag-along, he had no choice but to follow. Unexpectedly, this thigh he was hugging had brought him straight into a trap. No, to be precise, only he had walked into the trap. Muyu already had a resident status. Bro, why don't you find a way to send me to Gotham City? I feel like being a police officer there might not be bad. Muyu patted Zhang Wei on the shoulder. I only said you had talent in that area, don't overestimate yourself. Even Gordon would probably shake his head at you. Just honestly lie low until this dungeon is over. I'm handling things, you can rest easy. Zhang Wei opened his mouth to speak but stopped, eventually swallowing his words. Muyu did indeed always achieve his ultimate goals, but the process, sigh. In Zhang Wei's impression, Muyu was the type of person who only pursued result-oriented justice and completely ignored the process. He was probably the type who, when doing a big math problem, would calculate the answer in his head and be too lazy to write down the process, just writing solution, and the answer before handing in the paper carelessly. If he were just a simple employer, Muyu's way of doing things would be quite reassuring. There basically wouldn't be any accidents, and even if there were, just paying more money would solve it. But this time was different. Zhang Wei was a participant. He felt like a hostage in Rainbow Six Siege right now. It seemed like people on both sides could kill him at any moment. Just as Zhang Wei was lost in thought, Muyu had already finished looting the bodies, not only recovering the 200 gold he had just paid but also gaining an extra 1,500 gold in savings. Geez, how does this money keep increasing the more I spend? Muyu also quickly cleaned up the aftermath, restoring the scene to how it looked before they arrived, as if nothing had happened here. His technique was so proficient that it made Zhang Wei feel afraid. Don't overthink it, I just play a lot of games. Yeah, that's right, the one with the barcode on the back of his head. Do you really think I haven't played it? Who are you trying to fool with that line? Zhang Wei was frantically roasting him in his heart, but his face showed an expression of I see, I believe you. It's a pity, it looks like it's almost dawn, so we have to stop here. Sigh. Muyu said regretfully. Ah, that's such a pity. Stop here? What else did you want to do? This is someone else's territory. Zhang Wei was about to go crazy. Alright, let's go rent a room first, then get some rest. During the day, I'll go out to scout the path and gather some intelligence. You, as an undocumented resident, just hide in the room. I'll come get you when it's time to start the fight. Hearing this, Zhang Wei finally breathed a sigh of relief. After so long, he finally said something sensible. However, the next second, Muyu pushed up his glasses and continued, by the way, we can also go see if there are any local specialties. As a qualified player, since he was already here, he naturally couldn't just focus on the main quest. Even if there were no side quests with question marks all over the screen to do, he at least had to take something with him. If I remember correctly, the Blood Hand Gang seems to produce a lot of recovery and explosive items. If there's a chance, let's see if we can snatch some to take with us. Buying local specialties, that's a good thing. Zhang Wei nodded thoughtfully, and even wanted to ask Muyu to bring some for him too. Wait, so it wasn't buying? How many times do I have to say it? This is someone else's territory. You actually want to rob someone's stuff on their own turf? Although this does seem like something Muyu would do. But Zhang Wei was already numb. He looked at Muyu with a desperate expression, his eyes filled with a hint of pleading. Boss, can we not be so wild with our methods? I'm just kidding. I'm a model citizen, how could I possibly use robbery? Of course, I'll have to pay for it. Muyu patted Zhang Wei on the shoulder happily, then turned and withdrew from the scene. Although the entire process from the conflict to the final cleanup only took 2 or 3 minutes. But considering that the super flash Zhang Wei had thrown earlier might very well attract people, it was best to slip away quickly. Zhang Wei had no choice but to follow, a tag-along didn't have the right to choose. Oh right, this guy actually seems to be a model citizen? Damn, How on earth did he get that title? Just as Zhang Wei was complaining in his heart, Muyu, who was walking in front, pushed up his glasses, his expression instantly changing from the previous playful one to a calm and indifferent one. Zhang Wei knew Muyu in reality. Based on the other person's impression, he was not a cautious person, but a bold, radical, highly proactive, and pleasure-seeking maniac who feared the world wouldn't be chaotic enough. Therefore, the cautious Muyu had to show his normal side in front of Zhang Wei. Meeting an acquaintance in a dungeon is really troublesome. Must find a way to get an item that can conceal one's identity. The boisterous shouting and the wave upon wave of hawking sounds, for a moment, Muyu thought he had returned to the wet market downstairs from his home. They call it a trade center, isn't this just a marketplace? Muyu muttered to himself. This was the trade center of the Bloodhand Gang, a place specifically for selling local specialties. Aside from stalls exclusive to the gang, there were also some stalls specifically rented out to outsiders. However, the rent was something a normal person could not afford, and if one were only selling ordinary goods, the profit would very likely not even cover the cost of the stall. Therefore, the true purpose of these stalls was actually for fencing stolen goods. At the same time, this trade center was also a designated safe zone by the Bloodhand Gang, where all violent conflicts were prohibited. Even members of the Bloodhand Gang, including advanced cadres, had to abide by this rule. However, this only restricted violent conflict. Verbal abuse and physical provocation were not prohibited. Thus, it was common for both sides to get heated from arguing and agree to take the conflict outside to resolve it on the spot. Most of the time, however, what was resolved was not the conflict, but the source of the conflict. After all, if you can't solve the problem, you can always choose to solve the person who raised it. How much for these blood drops? Muyu first sought out a vendor selling restorative items. Among his many professions, restorative ability was what he lacked the most. The only two possibilities for him to obtain restorative effects were the Profiteer profession's forced acquisition and the Lucky One profession's good luck toolbox. Forced acquisition, active designate a target and pay a price to purchase the usage rights to one of the target's random skills. The skill's rarity and duration are directly proportional to the price. Cooldown, 24 hours. Good luck toolbox, active gloomy green upon use, randomly draw an item. If it is a prop, it has 50% of the original item's effect. If it is equipment, it has a time limit. If it is a skill, bloodline, or organ, it has a time limit, and the duration is halved compared to equipment. The item rank is directly proportional to the user's rank. Cooldown, 1 instance. And these two skills were merely possibilities. Whether he could randomly obtain a skill or item with restorative effects was entirely up to luck. The vendor glanced at Muyu, 100 gold per unit. If you buy 10 or more, I'll give you a 10% discount. Make it cheaper, and I'll take them all. There were a total of 20 blood drops on the vendor's stall. For such restorative items, Muyu naturally wanted to buy as many as possible. He would never think he had too many. Even if he couldn't use them himself, he could take them out and sell them to other awakened. Dream Realm gold coins were far more valuable than the banknotes inside the instance. Oh? The vendor looked at Muyu meaningfully. Although blood drops were essential restorative medicine, it was truly rare to see a big client buy so many at once. Moreover, 2,000 gold was not a small sum in the city of blood and sin. To be able to pull out so much money at once, that was truly a fat fish. Such a large order attracted the attention of quite a few people. Muyu ignored the malicious gazes around him and smiled slightly at the vendor. 30% off, and I'll take them all. No way, 20% off at most. This thing isn't exactly a rare item. If you won't sell, there will always be someone willing to. Blood drops were indeed not rare items. At the same time, because this city had no proper doctors, let alone hospitals, blood drops were essential medicine. However, their price was extremely expensive. This resulted in a high supply and high demand, but very few people buying, mainly because they couldn't afford it. Yet, it did not cost the Bloodhand Gang much to produce blood drops, which led to a very strange phenomenon. As a medical necessity, patients could not afford it, vendors could not sell it, and the manufacturer kept producing it but refused to lower the price. After all, if it did not sell, the Bloodhound Gang still would not lose anything. The only ones losing out were the ordinary people who desperately needed these supplies but could not afford them, and the vendors partnering with the Bloodhound Gang, whose goods gathered dust and would not sell. This kind of abnormally twisted commercial phenomenon was not rare in this city. Regardless of which gang it was, they all monopolized at least one daily necessity to some extent. Or rather, this was one of the prerequisites for a gang to obtain an independent territory. In the end, Muyu bought all the blood drops at a 25% discount. Blood drop, consumable silver white after consumption. It can rapidly recover abnormal statuses associated with the blood tag, including but not limited to blood loss, scurvy, and abnormal blood circulation. After consumption, you will gain low-rank blood attribute resistance and consumable blood drop resistance. Low-rank blood attribute resistance. Damage effects from sources with the blood tag are reduced by 20%, lasting for 30 minutes. Consumable blood drop resistance. Consuming the same consumable again will reduce its effect by 50%. After consuming it 5 times in a row, the consumable becomes completely ineffective. The effect lasts for 60 minutes. I didn't expect it to be a silver white rank consumable. This was a huge score. Muyu looked at the item effects on his panel, his heart blooming with joy. Before obtaining ownership of the blood drops and being able to see the attribute panel, Muyu had thought these were at most light gray rank consumables. Silver white rank consumables usually sell for 10 to 30 Dream Realm gold coins on the market. For a rapid healing potion like blood drop that also provides a buff for attribute damage resistance, it would start at least 20 gold coins. Muyu had made a killing this time. There are not many instances where one can easily purchase items recognized by the Dream Realm. In most instances, aside from completion rewards and quest rewards, if you want to obtain instant specialties, you either have to get them from NPCs or learn the craftsmanship skills yourself and then use the materials within the instance to produce them. However, the threshold for both of these methods is quite high. Therefore, an instance like the City of Blood and Sin is seen by the Awakened as a welfare level where they can restock in bulk. Of course, the premise is that you can complete the mission and clear the instance, otherwise, no matter how many items you scavenge inside, you won't be able to take any of them out. After purchasing the blood drops, Muyu reserved about 3,000 blood banknotes and spent 2,500 to purchase some more specialties of the Bloodhound Gang. Before meeting Zhang Wei, Muyu had also seized quite a bit of loot. These included burst-type consumables like Blood of Rage and Blood of Cooling, as well as blood poison spray which carried both the poison and blood tags. It could be used to poison targets or to enchant bladed weapons and ammunition. Of course, this thing was also quite expensive, so Muyu only bought one bottle. Muyu could be said to have returned fully loaded this time. As he left the trade center, satisfied, he took away not only the goods but also a few jackals harboring ulterior motives.